Year 1, Part 12. Pat went in to answer it, as Winnie had her Christmas baby in her arms. When Pat heard Judy's voice, she knew that something tremendous had occurred, for Judy never used the telephone if she could help it. "Patsy dear, is it yourself? I do be having a word for you. She's here!" "Judy! Who? Not the Countess?" "I'm telling you, but I can't be explaining over the phone. Only come as quick as you can, darling. Siddy and your dad have gone to town." "We'll be right over," gasped Pat. But how to get right over? Frank was away with the car. There was nothing for it but the old buggy and the old grey mare. It would take them an hour to get to Silverbush, and Uncle Brian must be phoned too and asked to bring Mother right home. Between them, Pat and Cuddles got the mare harnessed, and after several hundred years, or what seemed like it, they found themselves alighting in the yard of Silverbush, which looked as quiet and peaceful as usual, with just dogs sleeping on the doorstone and 3 kittens curled up in a ball on the well platform. "I suppose the Countess is in the big parlour," said Pat. "Let's slip into the kitchen and find out everything from Judy first." "How do you talk to a countess?" gasped Cuddles. "Pat, I think I'll go hide in the barn loft." "Indeed you won't. You're not a Binny. We'll say Judy, and then we'll slip upstairs and get some decent clothes on before we beard the lion in her den." Pat had on her blue linen afternoon dress, which, incidentally, was the most becoming thing she owned. Cuddles wore her pretty green sweater with its little white embroidered linen collar, above which her wind-tossed hair gleamed, the color of sunlight on October beaches. Both girls ran, giggling with nervousness, up the herringbone brick walk to the kitchen door and rushed in unceremoniously. Then they both stopped in their tracks. Cuddles' eyes wireless to Pat. "Do you really live through things like this, or do you just die?" Judy Plum and the Countess of Medchester were sitting by the table, whereupon the remnants of a platterful of baked sausages and potatoes. At the very moment of the girls' entry, Judy was pouring cream from her cream cow into her ladyship's cup, and the latter was helping herself to a piece of the delightful thing Judy called bishop's bread. Gentleman Tom was attending meticulously to his toilette in the centre of the floor, and Boldenbad was coiled on the Countess's lap, while McGinty was squatted by the legs of her chair. Tillytuck was sitting in his corner, fortunately minus the fur cap, which, however, hung on his chair back. Judy was in her striped drugget, but with a beautiful white apron starched stiff as a board. She was as completely at her ease as if the Countess had been a scrub-woman. As for Lady Medchester, Pat, amid all her dumbfounderment, instantly got the impression that she was enjoying herself hugely. "And here," said Judy, with incredible nonchalance, "are the girls I've been telling you of. Mrs. Long Alec's daughters, Patricia and Rachel." The Countess instantly got up and shook hands with Patricia and Rachel. She had mouse-coloured hair and a square, reddish face, but the smile on her wide mouth was charming. "I'm so glad you've come before I have to go," she said. "It would have been dreadful to go back home and have to tell Clara that I hadn't seen any of her cousins at all. She has always had such a dear recollection of some wonderful days she spent on Prince Edward Island when a child. It was too bad to come down on you like this, but I got a cable from England last night which made it imperative I should leave tonight, so I had to come this afternoon. Your Judy," she flashed a smile at Judy, "made me delightfully welcome, and showed me around your lovely home, and, last but not least, has given me a most delicious meal. I was so hungry." Somehow they found themselves all sitting round the table. Pat realized thankfully that Judy had had sense enough to put the best tablecloth on it, and the silver spoons. But why on earth hadn't she got the supper in the dining room? And what was the silver teapot doing on the dresser while the old brown crockery one graced the table? And there was Tillytuck, sitting in his shirt sleeves, Was there really anything to do but die? What was one to say? Pat wildly thought of an article in a recent magazine on how to start a conversation with people you have just met. But none of the gambits seemed to fit here exactly. However, they were not necessary. The Countess kept on talking in a frank, friendly, charming way that somehow included everybody, even Tillytuck. Pat, with a reckless feeling that nothing mattered now anyhow, flung conventionality to the winds. Cuddles was never long rattled by anything, and in a surprisingly short time they were all chatting gaily and merrily. The Countess insisted on their having some tea and bishop's bread with her. She was on her third cup herself, she said. Judy trotted to the pantry and brought back some forgotten orange biscuits. Lady Medchester wanted to hear all about Mother, and was only sorry she couldn't see her way clear to taking a Silverbush kitten back with her to England. You see, one of your cats has already quite made up his mind to like me, she laughed, looking down at the placidly heaving, furry flanks of Bad.
And that cat doesn't consent to everyone, speaking symbolically, ma'am, said Tillytuck.
Pat had a confused impression that it was quite proper to say ma'am to a queen, but hardly the way to address a countess. A countess! Was the stout, comfortable lady in the plain, rather sloppy tweed suit really a countess? Why, she seemed just like anybody else. She had the oddest resemblance to Mrs. Snuffy Madison of South Glen, only Mrs. Snuffy was the better looking. And there was no mistaking it. She was enjoying the bread and biscuits. Cats don't, said Lady Medchester, smiling at Tillytuck out of her hazel eyes and giving the wistful McGinty a nip of sausage. That is why their approval, when they do bestow it, is really so much more of a compliment than a dog's. Dogs are so much easier pleased, don't you think?
You've said a mouthful, ma'am, said Tillytuck admiringly.
Cuddles, who, up to now, had contrived to keep a perfectly demure face, narrowly escaped choking to death over a gulp of tea. Pat, glancing wildly around, suddenly encountered Lady Medchester's eyes. Something passed between them. Understanding, comradeship, a delicious enjoyment of the situation. After that, Pat didn't care what anybody did or said, which was rather fortunate, for a few minutes later, when Lady Medchester happened to remark that she had had friends on the Titanic, Tillytuck said sympathetically, "Ah, so had I, ma'am. So had I." "The old liar!" Judy said under her breath, but everybody heard her. This time it was Lady Medchester who narrowly escaped disaster over a bit of biscuit, and again her twinkling eyes sought Pat's. "Couldn't you stay till Mother comes?" asked Pat, as the Countess rose gently and regretfully displacing her lapful of silken cat. "I'm so sorry I can't. I've really stayed too long as it is. I have to catch that boat train, but it has been delightful, and I could tell Clara that at least I've seen Mary's dear girls. You'll be coming to England some day, I'm sure, and when you do you must look me up. I'm so sorry to put this beautiful cat down."
"You've got hairs all over your stomach, ma'am," said Tillytuck. "Dogs ain't like that now."
If looks could have slain, Judy would have been a murderess. But the Countess put her hands on Pat's shoulders, kissed her cheek, and bowed her head, shaking with laughter. "He's priceless," she whispered, "priceless, and so is your Judy. Darlings, I only wish I could have stayed longer." The Countess picked up a little squashy hat with a gold and brown feather on it that looked like a hand-me-down from the Silverbridge store, adjusted a silver fox stole, which Pat knew must have cost a small fortune, kissed Cuddles, made a mysterious visit into the pantry with Judy, donned a pair of antiquated gauntlets, and went out to her car. Before she got in, she looked around her. Silverbush had cast over her the spell it cast over all. "A quiet, beautiful place, where there is time to live," she said, as if speaking to herself. Then she waved her hand to Judy. "We had such a pleasant little chat, hadn't we?" and was gone. Oh, but Silverbridge has been honoured this day," said Judy as they went back in. Judy, tell us everything. I'm simply bursting. And how did you come to have supper in the kitchen?
Oh, don't be blaming me, entreated Judy. It do be a long story that'll take some telling. Never did I live through such an afternoon in my life. Tillytuck, do ye be wanting a little bite? Not that you deserve it, but there's some of the pataties and sausages left if you care for them. What's good enough for a countess is good enough for me, said Tillytuck, sitting down to the table with avidity. She's a fine figure of a woman, that, though maybe a bit broader in the beam than you'd expect of a countess, symbolically speaking. I found something alluring about her.
Come out to the graveyard, whispered Judy to the girls. We won't be disturbed there, and I could be telling you the tale. Sure, and 'twill be one for the annals of Silverbush. Uncle Brian's just phoned that Mother was away to a picnic with some friends of Aunt Helen's, and Cree couldn't locate her. It doesn't matter now, sighed Pat. Why, oh why do things never happen as you plan? But I don't care. She was lovely, and she enjoyed herself.
Oh, that she did,
agreed Judy, sitting herself on Weeping Willie's tombstone, while Pat and Cuddles and McGinty squatted on Wild Dick's.
And nothing good or magnificent about her. But when she drove in, girls dear, I didn't be knowing for a minute whichever I stood on me heels or me head. I did be taking her up to the poet's room to wash her hands. I did all the honours, even to slipping in that extra nice cake of soap you brought home the other day, the one wrapped up in shiny paper, and the best of the embroidered towels. I couldn't manage the new spread, but if you had heard her ladyship rave over the beautiful patchwork quilt, then I dashed up to my room for a squint in my book of useful knowledge, but never a word could I find about entertaining the nobility, so I had to be falling back on what I could remember of the doings at Castle Macdermot. It do be a pity I never thought of slipping into my dress-up dress, but I was a bit excited like. When I'd finished explaining to her that I'd phoned for you, nothing would do her but I must show her all around the place. She said she wanted to see a real Canadian farm at a close range. It did be suiting me, for I didn't be knowing if it was manners to leave her all alone, and to sit with the countess in the big parlour was a fearsome thought. I did be taking her all through the orchard, and the silver bush, and the cat's burying ground, and then all through the graveyard, and telling her all the old stories. And didn't she laugh over Whopping Willie? Then, when we went back to the house, she wanted to see me kitchen, and me not knowing how just dog would behave. When we got in, she says to me, just like the old friend to another, could you let me have a cup of tea, Judy? And what is that delicious odour I smell? Well, girls dear, you know just what it was. Me bit of baked sausage and pataties I had in the oven for Tillytuck and myself, everyone else being away. Will you be giving me a taste of it? Says she, wheedling like. Right here in the kitchen, Judy, where the scent of lilacs is coming in through that window, Judy, says she. And the very same white kittens that hung on me nursing wall more years ago than I'll admit even to you, Judy, says she. Sure, and I couldn't stand up to a countess, so she had her way. I got out the best silver teapot and one of the parlour chairs for her, but she plunked herself down on old Nehemiah's and says she, I want my tea right out of that old brown pot. There's nothing like it for flavour, says she. And nothing would do but I must sit down with her and take a share of the sausages and pataties. But I wasn't after eating many, girls dear. My appetite wasn't with me. 7 of them sausages disappeared, and I ate only the one of them. Think of it, me drinking tea with the countess, and crooking my little finger real elegant when I happened to think of it. Madam Binny'll never be believing it. And would you be believing it, girls dear? She was at Castle Macdermot herself when she was a girleen, and told me all about the old place. It did be making me feel I must be going to see it afore long. Presently, Boldenblad comes along asking, have you room for a cat? And jumps up in her lap. You saw for yourselves she was a definite braid from cousin Nicholas. Well, We did be sitting there, colloquing, her and me, and the cats, real cosy and friendly, when I heard a terrible noise in the back porch. It didn't sound like anything on earth, but it did be knowing it was Tilly Tuck gargling his throat, him thinking it was a bit sore this morning. I did be glancing at the Countess a bit apprehensive like, but she was admiring me cream cow and taking no notice apparently. I was fearing when he finished with his throat he'd be breaking out into a psalm, but never did I think he'd have the presumption to come in. I was clean flabbergasted when I saw him standing in the doorway. I did be giving him the high sign to take himself off, but he paid no attention, and was all for sitting down to her ladyship's hat, which she had tossed on a chair careless like. I got it away just in time, girls dear, and down he plumped. Would ye believe it? Her ladyship smiled at him in that nice way she has, and passed a remark about the weather. And didn't Tillytuck tell her rain was coming because he had rheumatism in his arms? And then, tilting back on the hind legs of his chair, with his thumbs tucked into his belt, casual like, he went on to tell her one of his tragedies, how the lion had got out of his cage and clawed him. It was a leopard last time, I couldn't help saying, sarcastic like, but her ladyship took his measure, and I could see she was ladling him on, and him thinking he was showing me how to hobnob with the quality. Then just dog started to throw one of his fits, but Tillytuck whisked him out so quick I'm not thinking her ladyship took it in. What with it all, my nerves were getting a bit jumpy. Never was there a more welcome sound to my ears than the old Russell's mare trot up the lane.